Square Enix has two really popular JRPG franchises, but they're popular in different parts of the world. Final Fantasy, originally made by Square, is really popular over in the West, while Dragon Quest, originally made by the company Enix, is very popular over in Japan. It's pretty interesting to think about and very unfortunate that Dragon Quest hasn't really gotten a big spotlight in the West, at least until its latest entry, Dragon Quest XI, that released on PC and PS4. Now that surprisingly popular entry has revisited the West, coming out on handhelds with a ton of new features. So let's get started with this tongue twister of a name. Here is my review of Dragon Quest XI's Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch. The story of Dragon Quest XI is about a young man known as the Luminary, the reincarnation of an ancient hero tasked with saving the world from the rise of the Dark One. Unfortunately, not all humans think the Luminary is a cause for good. They accuse him of being evil himself and hunt him down like a monster. This plot scenario is a little bit cliche when it comes to the franchise and the genre, because Dragon Quest has used the "you are the hero destined to stop the evil devil" thing many times in the past. But unlike a lot of the older games, it is really fleshed out, especially when it comes to character arcs. And I'm not just talking about party member character arcs. The NPC arcs that you see across the story are really well done and some of the best that I've seen in the genre. And to add on to this, the flawed and awkward character arcs for the party members that happen between Acts 2 and 3 of the original game have been improved here thanks to the new story scenarios from the Switch release. When it comes to gameplay, this is a turn-based RPG with lots of customization and optional content. First of all, let's talk about everything that's new here. Lots of games out there carry the name Definitive Edition, but I think Dragon Quest XI's is the first game I found that really truly fits that name. I believe this because Square Enix basically took both versions of Dragon Quest XI and combined them into one game. This allows you to play in 3D mode, which looks just like the PS4 version, as well as 2D mode that looks like the sprite-based retro version that was on the 3DS. Another big addition is the ability to visit the worlds of all 10 previous Dragon Quest games and doing missions there. Adding all of this together on top of the new story scenarios that you get in the main quest for the party members and the inclusion of a Japanese voiceover track rather than just the dub, you've got a massive amount of new content on top of an already massive RPG. Now let's talk about progression in this game's model. Dragon Quest is pretty much the opposite of Final Fantasy when it comes to Square Enix. Whenever a new mainline Final Fantasy game comes out, it tries to innovate and reinvent itself in a lot of ways. But Dragon Quest pretty much sticks with its original formula, improving bits and pieces there, leaving the innovation and experimentation to spin-off titles like Dragon Quest Builders and Dragon Quest Heroes. As such, Dragon Quest XI feels like an old-school retro RPG, but with a very modern look to it. The game is pretty linear in terms of world map progression until you get a ship and can start sailing around the world, and it's got a bit of a retro challenge when it comes to the game's difficulty, both in terms of the normal difficulty scaling and all of the hard mode options that you can turn on when you start your adventure. Outside of that, though, you got basic progression where you're wandering around on a world map, getting new story missions when you find new locations, and taking part in a lot of turn-based battles against monsters and bosses. The combat itself is very similar to the 3D combat of Dragon Quest 8 and 9, giving you a third-person perspective instead of the constant first-person mode that you got in earlier games. And when it comes to what you can do in battle, it's pretty simple. Every character learns different spells and abilities that they can use MP for, and everybody will eventually go into a pep-up state where all of their stats go up, they unlock special group attacks, and they have a little animation that, thanks to Toriyama's artwork in the Dragon Quest series, makes it look like they go Super Saiyan Blue. You don't really have that many different things that you can do, and thankfully whenever you want to grind, you can go into the tactics settings to let the party basically go on auto battle fighting for you when you need a few levels. And once you start gaining those levels, you can start going into character customization. There's a skill tree for every party member that branches out in a few directions. You can learn skills based off of unique abilities that only that character learns, and you've also got skills that you can learn based off of all of the different weapons that they can choose to wield. Finally, let's get to repetition, content, and length. Dragon Quest XI is a very long game, and the monster designs do get a little bit repetitive towards the end. When I'd cleared about half the game, I was already seeing a substantial number of monster and boss reskins in new areas. Of course, when I say halfway point, I don't mean 10 or 15 hours into the game, I mean more like 25 or 30 hours. This is a very long game that basically has two ending sequences. You get to the final boss and beat the game, and then the post-game starts, which is more of a continuation of the story that the main game started. You're given a lot of new story content and an overwhelming amount of side content that you can do that's all there to prepare you for the true final boss. To put this into perspective for you, I beat the main game mostly sticking to the main path in about 44 to 45 hours. And after I'd done a bunch of stuff in the post game and beaten the true final boss, I'd easily spent at least 15 hours more. Even without all of the new content of the Switch release, this is a very large and very long game. Now let's talk about presentation. Graphically, the game isn't as pixel perfect as the PS4 version was, but it looks beautiful for a handheld RPG. It looks great in docked mode, and the only real flaw of handheld mode is a slight blur. And really that's just a minor inconvenience. Even with this slight blur, the game still looks amazing in handheld mode and on the Nintendo Switch Lite. And speaking of different models, let's go right into battery life. On the original model, Dragon Quest XI-S has a battery range of 2 hours and 31 minutes up to 3 hours and 3 minutes. On the Nintendo Switch Lite, it has a range of 3 hours and 13 minutes up to 3 hours and 50 minutes. And on the V2 or Redbox model, it has a range of 4 hours and 54 minutes up to 5 hours and 21 minutes. Now, in conclusion, Dragon Quest XI-S really fits the Definitive Edition name, combining the content of both the PS4 and 3DS versions, along with adding an overwhelming amount of new content that not only gives you more stuff to do, but also adds new story that improves the flawed character arcs of the original. Now on the downside, the visuals do look a tad blurry when you've got it in handheld mode, and the monster designs do get a bit repetitive after a while with all of the reskins. But despite these minor inconveniences, whether you're a returning player who wants to see all of the new content or someone who's never played the game before, this is a great JRPG and a message of what the genre used to be that many developers have completely moved away from. Reviews to Go rates Dragon Quest XI-S for the Nintendo Switch a 9 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching and have a great day.